Hi, welcome. So, exactly 1 year ago, last January, I made a challenge to myself to do 100 stand up sets in 2024. And I did that, and it was pretty cool. So, I thought it would be a cool idea for a video if I listed off the things that I learned from that experience video essay style, because I love video essays. I do realize that 23 things is not a great mouth feel for a list video. I was going to try to make it 20 or 25, but it was just hard to cut things, and it's my video, so it's 23 things. There's a lot of big humps to get over when you first start doing stand-up. Like, you're figuring out where the shows are, and you're meeting people, and how everything works, and you're trying to write stuff. And the biggest thing I found is that stand-up's really mentally taxing, especially when I was first starting. Like, during my first couple sets, I was basically inconsolable as a human being. I couldn't hold conversations. My heart was beating so fast. My hands were shaking. What is this feeling? I felt a lot of pressure to have new jokes or to have better jokes, and I didn't have any friends who were comics. So basically what kept happening is I would have a set that would go bad, or I would feel overwhelmed, so I would take a break for a few weeks, and then I would feel like a lot of pressure and stress over wanting to go back but not knowing how it would go, and it just felt like I couldn't get any traction or rhythm with stand-up. So I created this challenge to get myself to fully commit to doing stand-up for a year. I kept track of every set I did in this notebook. It's wolves, 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 wolves. So for every set that I did, I would write down the number, I would write down where it was and the date, and I would give myself a score out of 10 for how I thought I did. And then I would journal afterwards, just a couple notes about things I learned or things I noticed or what I thought I could have done better on. Most of the things I'm going to talk about in this video are things that I wrote down and journaled about after sets. It also has some stuff in here that is like advice other comics gave me or things I learned from podcasts. So at the end of this video, I'm just going to put like a big list of every source I can think of, just in case I have any repeated information from other places. So before we get into the actual lessons, there's a couple disclaimers I need to go over. First of all, if there's any comics watching this video, I know that 100 sets in a year is not that much. I think to like people who don't do stand-up, 100 sets is absolutely, it sounds like a lot of sets. Most comics shoot for 200 to 500 sets in a year. I also had to consider that I was going to need to take a couple months off to focus on other projects during the year, so 100 sets felt like a really big swing for me. And honestly, now that I've done it, I feel like I could pretty easily do more than 100 sets next year. That leads to my next disclaimer. Stand-up isn't the only type of performing I do. I also do some acting projects and improv. So a lot of these things that I was writing about came from contrasting those different performance styles. And I think a lot of these tips actually would apply to any performing arts, not just stand-up. Although there are some stand-up specific ones also. And the last big disclaimer is that I'm still absolutely a beginner. This video is not like an expert perspective. 1 year of stand-up is pretty much nothing in the grand scheme of things. Most people say you're a beginner until like 3 to 5 years of doing stand-up regularly. I'll probably change my mind on some of the stuff that I say in this video as I learn more. So take what's useful, leave the rest. Okay, here we go. If they don't laugh, just keep going, big guy, like you're telling a story and you haven't even gotten to the funny part yet. Let's talk science for a moment. Typically in a joke premise, after the setup, you'll have many punchlines that will build momentum to a big punchline. And then you'll have a bunch of tags at the end. Tags are like punchlines that need no setup, and usually you put a bunch of them at the end of the joke. Here's an example of a joke I have to show these definitions.
I tried switching to a radio alarm clock recently because looking at my phone first thing in the morning was making me anxious, and I thought, using a radio alarm clock would be like returning to nature. Waking up to a radio alarm clock is different. The first thing you hear, 34 people died in a fire last night. And recent studies show that the world is ending and it's your fault, you lazy fuck. Get out of bed. You're listening to Jan and Jizz in the morning. Here's 4 hours of ads and then Cotton Eye Joe.
Okay, so what I'm getting at with this tip is the impulse when you know you've written a joke and heard laughs at a certain point is to pause for laughter there every time. But don't ever assume that the crowd is going to laugh there every time, because if you pause to silence, it kind of feels like belly flopping. Now, obviously, you want to pause if they do laugh, but always be ready to just keep moving and pretend that there wasn't even a punchline there if they didn't laugh at it, because then there wasn't one. They didn't find it funny. Watch how you stand. A lot of new comics have things that they do physically on stage that they don't even notice that they're doing that can be really distracting to an audience. Like a really common one is rocking back and forth on your feet. Something that I was doing that I didn't notice was if I started feeling nervous on stage, I would take the tiny mic like this. I would put my arm under my armpit and I would hold the mic like this. And so I was like really closing myself off on stage because I felt stressed. So what I started doing instead when I noticed that was I would hold the mic stand with my arm open so that I was at least opening myself up to the audience while still gripping on to something for dear life. Because it's scary up there. Next up, some choices that you make are actually coping mechanisms. For my first couple sets, I acted very deadpan on stage in my delivery. Deadpan is a style of comedy that's, really fun. A lot of people are really good at it. I'm not. I'm definitely not a deadpan comic. And eventually that style of delivery did start to fade as I became more comfortable on stage. What I realized was that I was doing that because I was scared, and it was unintentional, but basically I thought that if I sounded on stage like I didn't care what the audience thought, then I would care less. So I would, deliver anything like, oh my God, I don't even care about this, like whatever. So keep an eye out for those choices, conscious and unconscious, and consider why you're making them. It is important to plan material that is within time constraints. Most of the sets I did this year were 5 minutes or 7 minutes or 10 minutes. So usually what I would do is I would plan material that fills 80% of that time if I was just saying it regularly to myself. Usually audience laughter would fill that additional 20%. And then I would also have a short backup joke just in case I fall under time that I would do or not do. So for example, if I had a 5-minute set, I would plan material that was about 4 minutes plain without laughter. Next up, in a stand-up show, you are not the only performer going on stage that night. So consider what jokes you're telling, consider the audience that you're telling it to, consider where you are in the lineup, and tailor your jokes accordingly. If you're the fourth comic to go up and tell a really long personal story, or the show feels really low energy, you will do much better, and the showrunner will appreciate you more if you pivot and do something different. I learned this lesson the hard way when I got to a venue. The mic was 2 feet away from a family eating dinner. I decided to do a really physical act out anyways. It was very aggressive and off-putting and not in a fun way. Write jokes that you are excited about, jokes that you think are funny. I was for a long time writing jokes that I didn't even consider if I liked or not. I was just doing them because I thought that an audience would like them or they fit a style I needed to have. But you can't get hung up on what the opinion of the audience is going to be because truthfully, you never know if they're going to like a joke or not. Sometimes I came up with a joke that I really liked and it didn't land at all. And other times I would write a joke that I didn't like and it would do really well. I don't know what to do with that information. But I do know that when I was performing jokes that I didn't really like just because I thought the audience would like them, even if they did well, it didn't feel as great. So you might as well do jokes that you like and die with honor. This next one is an addendum to that, though. Jokes will grow. Jokes aren't always great from the start or exciting to you from the start. Sometimes they'll grow on you and they'll grow on an audience too as you keep working on them. Most material starts as just this little sliver of something that is intriguing to you. So try every joke you write, put it on stage, see how it feels, and don't throw anything out. I, for a long time, had this really long joke. I didn't think it would work on an audience. I just didn't think they'd like it, so I never did it. It was about an embarrassing time I had at an STI clinic once. It stayed on my phone for like 4 months untouched. When I eventually did that joke, it went really great, and it's since turned into like a 4-minute long bit that I have done so many times and I love doing. And when that happened, I was like, why haven't I been doing this joke this whole time? It's just been sitting on my phone because I was too afraid to try it. So look for the little slivers, try them out, maybe they'll grow on you. For writing, when you first perform a joke, cut to the funny part. This is very important with stories. A lot of jokes that you see are people telling stories about their life, but it's really important to get rid of all of the unnecessary personal details. When you're first doing a joke and you have a setup, make that setup a sentence long. That way it's easier for you to memorize, and then you'll also be able to judge quicker if the joke works or not and add on to it from there. I read somewhere that you want to aim for a punchline every 10 seconds. It's a writing form of minimalism, of brevity. So cut the fat. Learn how you write best and figure out how you need to put yourself into that headspace. For most other writing forms, I can just sit at my computer and type. I absolutely cannot do that for comedy. So if I want to write jokes, I know that I need to go for a drive or take a shower or play with one of my little fidget toys. You don't have to tell your entire bit all the time. When I first started performing my jokes, I would perform them verbatim. I'd memorize them like monologues and do them the exact same way every time, no matter how the bit was going on stage. Remember when we talked about tags earlier? You want to have a bunch of tags in your arsenal on a joke if you can, so that if a joke is really working with an audience, you can just keep reaping those punchlines. And also, it is very nice to know where a detour is in your joke for how to cut it early without the audience knowing that you're cutting it if it doesn't seem like they like the joke. Especially for long jokes, have an out. A joke is a living, breathing thing, and it should be a little bit different every time you tell it. This is a direct call out to me. Stop trying to recreate the one time that the joke did really, really well with an audience. Just be with the audience in the room. Whatever you discover with them when you're actually being present and, telling a joke like you've never done it before is going to be 10 times better than you trying to recreate the one time it went really well. Listen to them and discover what it looks like on that night. A lot of great jokes in writing come from anger or negativity, but it'll usually still work if you flip it to be positive, and it can keep your material from feeling too aggressive. I learned this recently when I was working on a joke about bar and grills. And basically the premise was, I hate bar and grills because their whole vibe is like, we have food, but you're not gonna like it. And I said to another comic that I liked the joke, but I didn't really want to work on it or try it because a lot of venues are bar and grills. And they said, do the joke, but instead of starting it with, I hate bar and grills, start it with, I love bar and grills.
Love a bar and grill.
And say all the same stuff. You can still make fun of something in a positive way. Do what you can to be in a good headspace before performing. Most of my best sets came from when I actually took the time before leaving for the venue to plan my set, plan maybe a new bit or a tagline that I liked. And that also meant I was usually less stressed when I got there. However, I have also had sets that I did not plan at all that turned out really good, so it isn't really a hard rule. This is a bit of a weird one, but try to stand near the stage before going up. If I was standing at the back of a venue or in a green room or talking, then it felt really jarring to go on stage, versus if I took a second to stand near the lights and feel out how the audience was doing, it made the transition to the stage a lot less aggressive. People love when you talk about things that are happening in the room. The whole idea of stand-up comedy is that you're perpetuating this idea that you are a naturally funny, normal person who just happens to go up on stage and chat and be absolutely hilarious by accident. Now, of course, we all know that the jokes are pre-written and you've done them 100 times, but do whatever you can to make the audience feel like this moment is organic and it'll never happen again. One way I had a lot of fun with this was before sets, I would write some little jokes about the venue or what it reminded me of, and the audience always loved it. Here's an example.
This place looks like like where a dominatrix would give a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, I had others in case that one didn't work. This place looks like Post Malone's Doomsday Bunker. This place looks like a strip club, but the strippers do spoken word after they strip. They get physically vulnerable, and then they get emotionally vulnerable.
I noticed a lot of the time these jokes that were unique to the space or to the show would do really well even if I didn't think the joke was that good. People are very forgiving of jokes when they know that you're actually being present in the room and thinking things up on the spot. That's a huge basis for improv. Is that a read on improv? Yes. Riffing is a style of stand-up where you're playing around with a certain idea and exploring it on stage without having a set structure or a way that it's written. It's a really common way to do jokes, especially if it's new and you don't know where all of the jokey parts are yet, so you're just experimenting. The thing that I learned about riffing is you want to at least know your punchline, because if it isn't going well and you don't even have a button to end it, then it just looks like you're rambling. The way that I've been crafting a lot of my sets recently, which I think is really fun, is I start out with a joke that has a looser premise or, something about the venue or the space, and if it goes really great, then that's awesome, and then I can move on to written material. And if it tanks, then I can fall back on written material. So it's kind of a win-win either way, usually. Next up, cut your likes, cut your ums. If you cut swears, it'll make you more creative. If the crowd is really quiet or they suck, no offense, jokes are landing, everything's going bad, everything is falling apart, London is burning, you gotta find a way to acknowledge it without ideally making fun of the audience. It can really put an audience off if you say something like, oh, these jokes are usually funny, or like, you guys suck, or you're a bad crowd. I have seen some comics be able to do this well, but usually I would say, and in my experience, it just separates you from the audience instead of getting them on your side again. This next one is very hopecore. It does get easier. I do not get as nervous before sets as I used to. I now feel like I could pretty much go up on stage any time of day if I needed to. I do still get nervous, which I think is a good thing, but it's not so extreme. This is a big one. Bombing. Everybody bombs. Every famous comedian that you like has bombed at some point, and they will bomb again, and you will too. What I've learned is sometimes there are things that you could have done better and it shows you things that you need to work on, but also sometimes there isn't really a big reason why you bombed. It was just a weird night or a weird crowd. I once did the exact same set twice in one night within the hour, and it killed at the first place and horrifically, painfully bombed at the second place.
Little bit about me, I'm a lawyer. I'm just kidding. I'm actually an office administrator. It's a little bit about me, I'm a lawyer. A lot of people don't know about famous snakes, but there are some famous snakes. There is like the snake from the Harry Potter movies, Nagini. You guys aren't gonna believe me, but she's like my people's Sydney Sweeney. Yeah. She's like my people's Sydney Sweeney. Yeah.
And that's not to say that there isn't anything I could have done better in that second set to help it, but it's just to say that there's a lot of variables other than you and your performance and your material that are just out of your control. So reflect on your bad sets only as long as it is productive and not self-flagellating. Self-flagellating. Flagellating. Performance breaks are important, but if you're going to take a break, try to do it after a good set and not a bad set. Because if you take it after a bad set, then you're going to see the next time you perform as a redemption instead of you just coming back. I'd say generally no one remembers the last set you did. Nobody remembers that it was bad, and people aren't seeing it as you redeeming yourself. So it's just going to stress you out if you do it that way. If you do take a couple days break or a couple weeks break after a good set, then that time can also be more productive, I find, because then I'm excited to come back and I'm saying, ooh, what am I going to do next? Instead of, fuck, I have to go back and do stand-up and I was bad at it last time. Watch other comics. Go to shows that you're not performing on. Watch stand-up specials. Watch, other performing arts. Improv, I find, is really interesting to watch to help with stand-up. And just try to take little pieces of how other people perform and see if you can channel that into what you do and make it better. I mean, don't steal, but if you're going to steal, do it smart. Yeah, that's the tip. Okay, this is the last one, so I made it a big one. When you are performing all the time, and when I say you, I mean me, it is very hard to not start putting all of your self-worth into how your performances go. I found that this was the hardest when I was performing stand-up the most often. I've also noticed it before if I was, doing a bunch of auditions in a short period of time. And I wouldn't always notice how it was affecting me because, if my sets were going really great, then on a day-to-day basis, I felt really great. But as soon as sets went bad, I felt really bad and really insecure. Performing is so fun. Stand-up comedy is so fun, I promise you that. But if there's one thing that I want you to take from this video, it's that you are so much more than the last 5 minutes you spent on stage. And you just can't let that be the only factor in your mental well-being. I still fall down that hole often, so. When I first noticed that this was happening, I was really worried that if I got better at letting go when I felt I didn't perform as well, then that would mean that I couldn't feel as good when I did a good job. Like you would need to, as a performer, choose to feel everything or feel nothing. But thankfully, my experience so far is that isn't the case. In time periods where I felt like I really hit my stride as a comic, I felt like I was able to learn from and reflect well on jokes that didn't go well, but still get really excited about the jokes that did go well. So I think you can have your cake and eat it too. So there you have it. There's everything I learned from doing 100 stand-up sets over the year. Overall, I think the biggest place I noticed an improvement is my confidence on stage. I just became a lot more willing to try new things and see how they went. I became a lot more comfortable in the scene. I made friends. I had my first headlining set in August, and that was really cool. So I'm excited for what the next year holds. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Goodbye.